Hi, everyone, and welcome back to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. As you know, I've been taking a few episodes from the past, and just been bringing them back so that we can hear some things that have been said because I've had some amazing people on that will just blow your mind of some of the things that they've been, talking and sharing with us. And so I wanted to bring back to you Joey Fennell, and he is a licensed counselor. And he's going to talk about in this episode the mental health in our youth. And he's going to show us 3 signs that may indicate that someone will follow through with suicide. I think this is something very important that we need to know as parents, but even as leaders or leaders in the church, or especially youth leaders. These 3 signs when someone is talking about suicide or they've been thinking about it, or you notice that someone is just going through a really hard time, a dark time. Listen, Joey talks to us about how to recognize these signs, the difference between just someone going through a hard time and depression and when someone will actually follow through with suicide. All right, enjoy this week's episode. Hi, this is One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. I pray that today one voice will be a blessing to you. And above all else, I pray that God's voice will be heard among this God's story. Enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. And this month we are going to be focusing on mental health. And I have a special guest with us today. His name is Joey Fennell. Did I say that right, Joey?
You did.
I really want to say Fennell, but it's Fennell, I guess. But we've known each other for a really long time. He's been in Statesboro residence here for as long as I can remember. And just a champion of a guy. Very educated. He has a Bachelor of Justice Studies. He has a Master in Divinity and a Master of Counseling. And he is now a counselor at Fresh Start Counseling Services. And today we want to focus on the mental health in our young people. You know, Joey, you do so many things in our community. I see you at the Sheriff's Department. I've seen you at the hospital. I see you all around, and you're always giving yourself away to everybody. And I just want to say thank you for giving into our community, into our young people, and into the lives of people. And welcome to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Janet. It's great to be here.
Well, we just want to get started because we're seeing a generation that is very wounded right now. Young people, as we were talking before the podcast began, that it seems like this generation is hurting and grieving right now, and it's especially through the pandemic. We're seeing a lot more young people coming in for counseling. Have you seen that in your office?
Absolutely. I think that there's no template for what we've been through.
Absolutely.
I continued to do this all last year, trying to figure out what's the next step, and thinking, what do I draw from? Mm-hmm. What's the experience I draw from to tell somebody something, help somebody?
Yeah.
And I had nothing.
Well, we've never been in a pandemic before.
No, absolutely.
And I don't know if you've ever studied mental health after a pandemic before.
There's not a lot out there.
No, I don't think so.
It's not good. What is out there was,
if
we go way back to a pandemic in the early 1900s, there's not a lot of information.
There really isn't.
It wasn't good.
No.
The results were not good.
That's why we really need the help of the Holy Spirit to help us each day. And you're gifted, you're called to do this. You see many people, and, being pastors here at Crossroads Community Church in Statesboro, we see a lot of people coming in, a lot of kids. They're just pretty messed up. Mm-hmm. They were messed up before the pandemic, but after it hit, it just escalated, And just from my view, what I've been seeing is I see a lot of kids right now cutting. Mm-hmm. They're suicidal. And I've noticed a pattern with the people that are cutting and they're suicidal is, their number one complaint is, I just can't feel anything.
Right.
I'm just numb. So what is the root of being numb? Because I've been trying to get to the root of that myself. And I know there's a lot of parents out there
want to help their kids, and they're just not feeling anything. So what would you have to say to those parents? And, what's the root of that, and how can we help them feel again?
Yeah. Well, cutting in and of itself is an expression. There's a feeling of I can't, we talked about not having a voice, and I can't articulate something. So if I'm so numb, I've got to feel something. And cutters will usually explain it that way and say, I couldn't feel, so I cut. Or I'm under so much pressure, like letting air off of a balloon, I need to let this pressure out. And then we also talked about the sensation that comes with that as well, like an endorphin rush that happens when, when you get that sensation or that initial onset of pain from cutting. So it can be all of those things, one of those things, but ultimately down in the middle of it for teenagers is, do I have a place to be able to put my stuff? And when there's not a place, a safe place, or it perceived there's not a place, they could be in the healthiest family in America, and still just be dying inside because they feel like that their voice is not being heard or it's not welcomed somewhere.
Wow, that's powerful. I think when you said that cutting releases endorphins, I mean, I've had a paper cut before, and that was the last thing that I think that is released when I have a paper cut. So it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around that. But I guess if you're feeling numb all the time, and
something's better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing. Yeah. So I guess the answer and the solution for that is for them to find their voice, to find out who they really are, because this generation, they just don't know, do they?
The ones who are struggling don't seem to, and they'll turn to anyone, anything. And I, not going to go down that path that all kids are these horrible people, but I feel like the ones that really, really struggle just don't feel like they have the place to just put something, say something, and they'll turn to friends or online or wherever it may be. And of course, over this past year, online has exploded with podcasts, with blogs, and all kind of areas to express. But that's really one-sided in a lot of ways. There's not a lot of feedback.
I love teenagers. I love I love the journey of it. Watching my 3 boys growing up has been so much fun, but it's work. I mean, you have to be involved in their life. And do you think a lot of that, there's not a lot of parents involved in their kids' life? Maybe because it's just one parent, or maybe they're just working all the time, or maybe they're disconnected somehow.
Janet, you're going to make me stop being therapeutic, and I'm going to get on a soapbox. So be careful. Be careful what you wake up here.
All right.
One of my biggest pet peeves is going into a restaurant and going to sit down and seeing a family or a couple and everybody's on their phone. At the same table. And I embarrass my own kids. I have 3 as well, 2 are no longer teenagers and one's still a teenager. But I would embarrass them so bad. And when they would see the family, they're, Dad, please don't. And I would always go to them and say, are y'all texting each other?
That's right.
I always just have to say it. But I see that, and then you get on the road, get behind a vehicle, and you see the video screens going in the back seat, And I've been there. I've done that. I'm not saying that we didn't have video screens traveling, but talk to your kids. Just give them an opportunity. I spent yesterday, traveling to baseball back with my son, and we talked some. Of course, he wants to put in his AirPods and watch something on his phone, but just taking the opportunities to be able to talk and share with your kids. Share your own wisdom, but gather some wisdom from a 17-year-old kid is interesting.
It really is, to see their insight and how they're thinking right now.
How they're seeing the world.
Yeah, how they're seeing the world. And they're coming through a pandemic right now. When we were teenagers, we didn't have a pandemic. No. But there was still a lot of drama, right?
Yeah. And I think that's been a thing. It's like, okay, we don't know what we're doing either, but let's drag you along with us, kid, and see, we'll get on the other side of it, rather than going, hey, how are you doing in this?
That's right. I just want our listeners to know that I think young people are amazing. They're wonderful. The journey is beautiful. But it is it takes work as a parent to invest in your children, and you may be wore out. But one of the things that we've done a lot is just pray a lot. Lord, give me grace. Just help me and show me what to do. Show me how to connect. So what do you see as one of the number one concerns with this generation and our young people as far as mental health is concerned?
Well, we mentioned it a while ago, and I think it really comes down to kids feeling like they have a place to put their stuff, having that voice, being heard, being listened to. And I was just thinking a while ago when you were saying something about number one, made me think about discipline. Made me also think about what's the number one problem with our kids. And I would say our parents.
Yeah, yeah.
When I have in my office, when kids get brought in by the parents, one session with a kid, about 10 weeks with the parents, and everything's a lot better. And I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to it too. Because the number one problem with raising kids is the laziness of parents that I see a lot of times, is that it's hard work. It really is hard work.
Yeah.
And if I have to take a privilege away from you, whoa, wait a minute, that's going to affect me.
Yeah.
Now I have to give you a ride somewhere rather than you having your car, those little things. And I know that jumps a little bit off the subject, but I think ultimately if we're communicating with our kids, and we're maintaining that communication with our kids, then we avoid a lot of those disciplinary actions because we stay on the same page. Yeah, they're going to do stupid stuff. They're going to make decisions that we wish, I wish you hadn't done that, you know, but if they're not life altering or life ending, you know, we can work through them.
You know, it's crazy. Sometimes I look at, families, and you see that the parents or the children are doing exactly what the parents are doing. They're just following the heart of their own parents.
Absolutely.
But yet the parents turn around and look and go, oh, that's not good. Yeah. And then they realize, oh, I need to change. So how do you reverse something when it's already been done?
Now we're really getting into mental health.
I know, right? It's like, okay, now we need to reverse some things that the parents were saying, I really want to change. I want to make a difference, but what's done is done. Yeah. So what do we do to change this?
Gosh, if we could answer that question, we could both write a book on it.
I know,
because
right?
Let's flip the coin over to the child who grows up in the alcoholic home or the abusive home, and they're valedictorian.
Yeah.
Explain that one to me. You know, you look at this kid and go, you have no reason to be as successful as you are, and somehow you are. And then that kid from the best family, the most doting parents, the most supportive, and they end up in rehab or somewhere else that's just where we'd rather them not be, or dealing with some type of addiction or their own issues. So ultimately we love our kids. We prop them up, we pray for them, we undergird them with everything that we have, and pray that foundation is there for them.
Do you think that the movies, the video games, the cell phone, social media has an effect on their mental health?
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
It has an effect on it.
Because we didn't have that when we were teenagers. We just had, at my house, we had something called a party line. You know what I'm talking about? Right. So you had one phone and everybody in the neighborhood used it. I'm telling my age now, right?
Yes. I think that is, yes. If you start this conversation, then you get an eye roll from most kids. Like, whoa, it wasn't like that for you. No, it really wasn't. And I think that social media and the immediacy of things it's so convenient. And it's so helpful. It's such a powerful tool in a lot of ways. But in other ways, it's that immediacy thing. What I see that kids, when I listen to kids talk and they're saying, it's another language out there that so-and-so didn't like this, or they said it, it took too long for them to respond, or they left me on open, or whatever it may be. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why is this a big deal for you? Or when my son says, why are you yelling at me? And I'm like, when did I yell at you? He goes, you texted me in all caps a while ago.
That means yelling.
I'm sorry, I hit the button and it's stuck. I feel like a granddad all of a sudden.
That's hilarious.
Yes. But it is another language that's, I mean, it's like a subculture that goes on, and it's so fast. It's lightning fast. And if some reaction happens and it's not supposed to happen, or it didn't happen fast enough, all of that is being interpreted constantly for kids, and for kids to be able to keep up with it. Yeah. And where I'm seeing the healthiest kids now, or healthier, are the ones that are saying, you know what, I'm not going to be online for a few days.
There you go.
Or I'm going to take a break. And it's really interesting to see during the pandemic, I saw that with some families who started eating together again, who pulled out the puzzles, who got game boards out, and it was just kind of, that was fun to watch. And for our own family, we experienced that a little bit too, of just spending time together, because this, as we go way back to last March, for those at least 2 or 3 months, that's time we'll never have with our kids again. And we would not have had it then if it hadn't been for a shutdown.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I've even seen that in my own kids. And I wouldn't say anything like, hey, you may want to think about coming off social media for a little while, because my kids are older. Like, I have one 26, one that's 23, and then Ryan just turned 18. But I've seen them say, hey, I think I'm going to come off social media for a while. I'm getting too, bogged down in this, and it doesn't feel healthy. Yeah. So that's really good. I think that's a great idea. Joey, just in our community, and you've probably seen this too, we've seen a lot of young people commit suicide. I can think of 4 off the top of my head, 4 young people, not including people middle-aged and older, during the pandemic that have committed suicide. And I remember before the pandemic hit, if one person that you knew committed suicide in your lifetime, that was a big deal, like in my lifetime. Yeah. And now during the pandemic, I'm overwhelmed with it, and I'm grieved by it, and I hurt from it. So what have you seen as a counselor and people coming in, and the suicide rate now, and what's the answer behind that?
Well, the numbers, trail behind what's actually going on. There's no doubt that it's on the rise. The kids that I'm seeing are coming in with an overwhelming sadness, which would be at the beginning of any type of suicidal, what we would call ideation, just the thoughts of, I don't want to be here anymore. This is overwhelming. I don't know what to do. So that's one extreme I see. The other extreme is kids who, if we say we're coming out of this right now, and I'm scared to say we're coming out of it, because I don't know, it's so up and down. But if we're on the rise, or, the cases are going down, I'm also seeing people who are there's fear, there's still anxiety, and I don't know what to do with normal. What is normal? Right. We were saying that, gosh, we were all saying it in March, April, May of last year. I just want this to be over. And I think if it had ended there, it would be a blip in history. But we've done this for so long now, and there's been so many voices out there, from one extreme to the other. I don't know what to believe. I'm so confused. And that's what I hear from a lot of kids. And with that confusion, knowledge is so powerful. And to have something concrete to say, this is what I can hold on to. I mean, adults don't have anything to hold on to. Right. What do we expect our kids to do when they're looking to the older people to go, what are we supposed to do here? Right. And then we're looking at, we don't know. From leadership, whatever you listen to.
Yeah, nobody knows.
we said that earlier of, I can watch the news and think, oh man, this is going to be over soon. I can flip the channel and not want to go outside. It goes from one extreme to the other. Even now, from some variant that pops up in India, or some other, if we're talking about the pandemic itself. But set the pandemic to the side, life's still happening from what it would have been anyway. Right. So we have just an added layer that's a huge layer on top of it that just continues to breed that sadness and being overwhelmed. You know, that the whole suicidal thing is, there's Thomas Joyner does a great thing about suicide, and he says that there has to be three things for it to happen, and that is burdensomeness, so you feel like a burden to someone, hopelessness or loneliness, and then you can have those two, and if they intersect, you can stay there. It's not a very good place to stay, but you're not going to die by suicide. The third piece of that, or a third circle that has to intersect, is the not having a fear of dying. And when you have that third piece is when most people either have an attempt or they successfully die by suicide. So that's quick education on it, and I follow that, and I use that.
That's powerful.
I use it in therapy with kids to educate them on it. And I see it, you know, it's not as linear as we would like for it to be, because that would be nice if I said, okay, where are you along the line? But I try to paint that picture in the therapeutic process, especially for kids, to understand and to tell me where they are, which also dictates if they're leaving my office or not.
Exactly.
You know, if they came in and they're like, I'm thinking I may do something to hurt myself. Well, you're not going home.
Exactly. Do you think that not having a fear of death is associated with not feeling anything at all?
It can be. It can be. It's where the logical meets the illogical. Those worlds collide to where, you know, if one Xanax is working really well, then 20 should do really well. So that's irrational.
Right.
But in the mind of someone who's really in that lowest place, that says, I just can't do this anymore. And now I'm at a place where I'm not really afraid of what's on the other side of this, because this has to end. And anything else has got to be better than this of where I'm stuck right now.
So you're saying if you have those three things together, those are like really red lights and flashing signs, warning signs.
It's usually going to happen. An attempt or a successful,
Wow.
And Joyner, his dad actually died by suicide while he was in grad school studying psychology, and that's where he went on and put his life's work into it after that.
That's amazing. You know, on a spiritual note, the Bible says this. Well, Jesus is in the book of Isaiah, but Jesus quoted it again, talking about, you know, he's bringing the good news to people, but he says, you know, put on the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, or I will give you a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. So sometimes, you know, there's a spiritual warfare over the minds and the hearts of young people. And I think that music and the atmosphere that is set at home plays on our emotions, also in our sadness and the things that are happening all around us. And the Bible says that there's a cure for that, and that's praise. You know, so we can put that on, and what that looks like is, you know, change the atmosphere in your house. You know, right now the music is so powerful in Christian music. When I was growing up, there was no Christian music. It was all hymns, you know, and if you were going to listen to anything on the radio, it was going to be Hank Williams Jr. Yeah, I had to think about it. Dolly Parton, Ann Klein, all these country singers, you know, or heavy metal, rock and roll. You didn't have a lot of good Christian music to listen to, but I'm so grateful for that now, that we have something called praise and worship, where they're singing scripture, and it's anointed music that is going through your house. So maybe if someone is listening right now and there's just a sadness among your house, maybe shift the atmosphere a little bit and put on some praise and worship music and listen to things that are actually going to fill you up. And I believe that's how we put on the garment of praise. And then the second thing is just think on the good things that has happened to you in your life, instead of concentrating on this pandemic has really been bad. Life is so bad. Nothing good can come out of this. You know, and a lot of people they're thinking like that. There's been so much death, and it's, you know, negative. And it was. I don't want to overlook how bad it was. But in the middle of it, if I stay focused on how bad it is, I'm not going to get out of this pit.
Right.
I got to focus on, okay, how are we going to get out, and what am I going to bring with me on the way of coming out? Because it's touched all of our lives. We're going to bring something out of this, and we got to figure out, what have I learned from this? God, what are you teaching me in this? And I think that's part of the tool that Jesus gives us to stay healthy in our heart and our soul and our spirit,
One of the things that or two questions I ask a lot of kids is what, this can be for those kids who are not even on a faith journey at all, is what makes you happy? Where do you find joy? Which kind of goes right along with that whole praise.
Yeah.
The area you were talking about a while ago is what makes you happy, what brings you joy, but then where do you find hope?
Yeah.
It just opens up all kind of doors, and kids love to talk about those things.
Wow.
Because they're deeper than we think they are.
Yeah, they are, aren't
and
they?
It may be something simple. It may be, the only thing that brings me joy is my cat.
Yeah.
Tell me about your cat.
Yeah.
And just allow them to talk about it, and then that opens up so many other doors that they'll let you go in.
Wow. Joey, maybe there's someone listening right now and they have a teenager at home and they're struggling with connecting with a teenager or struggling with their mental health, that it's just not healthy in a lot of areas, maybe and spiritually, but mentally also. What advice can you give to those parents that they're struggling with their teenager right now?
Put the phones down.
Put the phones down.
Turn
There
the
you
TVs
go.
off. Yes. And Janet, it sounds simple because it's not, if it hasn't already happened, and if it's not happening. And if you suddenly sit in front of your teenager and your phone's not in your hand and that's never happened, they're going to think you've lost your mind, or that door has been closed for so long. It's going to take some work to get there, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to crack that door open and say, hey, why don't you jump in the car with me? Let's just go ride. Secret of that is they can't get out.
Yeah.
And you got them. Or, take them out to eat. Make a meal, sit at the table. Just don't try to get a life story the first time it happens, but take 5 minutes today, 5 minutes tomorrow, and let that increase. And ask them what they want, what they need. Hey, I want to spend some time with you. What can we do? And
that's powerful.
you're going to get shut down, so expect it.
Yeah.
Don't get frustrated, but just continue to be persistent. You're the parent.
That is so true. I'm so glad you said that because my boys are older now, but when they were younger, I don't know if you know anything about my life, Joey, but I was pretty messed up. I was that suicidal girl. I was the one that was sexually abused. I was the one thrown in foster care. And so when I got married and I come to know the Lord, I knew nothing about parenting. I knew nothing about how to be a wife. So I prayed about everything because I just didn't know. And I knew that I couldn't follow the pattern of my life because it was pretty messed up, So there is hope for you guys. I promise.
There is.
There is hope. Things can change. You can just make up your mind and say, hey, this is the direction I want to go in. But I read a lot of books and I read the Bible a lot and I prayed a lot. I had an ear to hear the Lord and to hear the Holy Spirit to speak to me about my own triggers and not to put those on my children. But one thing that I read in one of Dr. James Dobson's books is to make dates with your children when they're small, individually. Because a lot of times we take them out together, but take them individually to Dairy Queen.
Right.
And make an appointment with them. Say, hey, I want it just to be you and me. Let's go out to eat. And get to know your child because they're different around you than they are around each other. That's one thing I've noticed, that my boys are not serious at all with each other, but when we get one-on-one, they'll start talking to me a little more. Yeah. And it's fun. You really get to know them, and then sometimes you see yourself in them and you went, oh my God, that's me.
I just used my phrase. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Because mine are close to the same age as yours. My two daughters are 23 and 21, and then 17-year-old son, and it's that way too. We get them together, and it's like they're all in elementary school again.
Yeah.
Just the banter begins like automatically, but one-on-one, it's just like, three little adults that are doing their thing, and it's fun. It's fun to be around it.
Yeah, it is. It's so much fun. One thing that I've always had to work on, because I was abused and people crossed lines with me. My family did, my stepfather. And I've noticed that when people cross lines in your life and they cross those boundaries, that it gives you permission now to cross boundaries. Like, okay, well, they're crossing boundaries, so I'm going to cross boundaries, and I'm going to, do the unspeakable. And you look for things in people that you can control, because it's the only thing that you can validate in your life. Does that make sense? Like, okay, well, I'm out of control with me, so I'm going to enter into this relationship, and there's no boundaries in it.
Right.
You take control over the relationship. And one thing that I had to learn early on, because that wasn't going to work in my marriage, I learned that straight up the first year. I can't control Carrie Swanson. And he was from a healthy home, but my home was not healthy at all. It was pretty messed up. And if you read my book, One Voice, you'll see this is a pretty messed up home. But I learned, I could really feel God's presence in my life and Him working on me. But there were some things I had to learn to do aside, apart from God and Him being a part of my life. Yeah. And I had to learn what were healthy boundaries, because I had no idea. Everybody had crossed those boundaries in my life. So what do you say about that? Do you see a generation or just a bunch of wounded people crossing boundaries?
Boundaries. This will be volume 2 for the podcast.
Yeah.
Boundaries is, I love to live in this area with people, because I think it's one of the number one things that people come into therapy not knowing that they don't have. And just starting the conversation, I'm thinking, wow, you're run over everywhere. Or your yes is way too big. Whatever those boundaries are, the way you're describing boundaries is allowing people to take advantage of you. And it's a lot of that. And then so I see boundaries also in how we limit ourselves to what we do, what we take on, how busy we are, those types of things. But boundaries is, if we just throw another book out there, Cloud and Townsend wrote the book on boundaries.
Yes, I love that.
I wish I had stock in it, because I've recommended it to so many people. But it is basically, the statement is, I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way anymore. That's the whole premise, in my opinion. If we have that mantra, well, the trap is, especially in the spiritual world, is serve, 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 serve. The least of these. All these things get pulled out of context in Scripture and thrown on the Christian that says, but you have to serve, you have to serve, you have to do more, do more, do more, do more. And even Jesus said one day, hey guys, I need to go off and pray.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
So if the Son of God needs to take a break, I'm pretty sure I need to take a break from time to time. And the boundaries also from what you were talking about in control, I think that's a very, very big issue, especially come the people I work with who've come through abuse, especially sexual abuse. Such a loss of control. There has to be a control of something. And then we do get the cutters, and we do get any type of eating disorder, things that I can control this. I can control my relationship, like you said. I can try to control something else. So I have to grasp onto something. And it's usually pretty internal, which is where the eating disorders and cutters come from. In that, not all, but there's usually something's driving that I need to control something. So teaching people to go, it's okay to say no. It's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to put this wall up here. Not that saying it's being rude or anti-Christian. It's saying I need to be healthy on my own 2 feet in order to be a service to other people, rather than being the doormat that's being served on top of. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, yes. And it took me so long Joey, to figure that out. I wish that I had known this 20 years ago. It would have saved me a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
But nobody was talking about sexual abuse 20 years ago.
Oh, no.
And I'm just now coming out telling people about my life because if things were surfacing. I mean, you guys, if you're keeping a secret right now, and maybe you're in your late 20s or 30s, I promise you it will surface.
Yeah.
You will start seeing triggers more and more the older you get. And I had to lean into counseling and do the same thing to try to get help. I read more books on boundaries. Who was it? Henry Cloud?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's Cloud Townsend.
Yeah, in Townsend. I read that book. It changed my life of what healthy boundaries look like. And and my husband has really good boundaries too. He taught me it's okay for you to say no if you don't want to do something. And the problem that I had, Joey, was it wasn't if I wanted to do it or not. I just didn't think it really mattered what I wanted because I was never asked that.
Right.
So just do whatever.
Yeah.
And you just take advantage of me. And I'm like, well, okay, well, let me see what I really want. And I had to practice that. It was something I had to really say, what do I want?
Yeah.
And what do I like and what do I don't like and what is too much?
Mm-hmm.
So finding a balance, finding those boundaries changed my life.
Yeah.
It changed the way I raised my kids. It changed the way I worked in church, and the way I treat people as a pastor.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when you're a pastor and you have unhealthy boundaries, you expect people to do the same thing that you're doing.
Right.
And they're healthy and they're going, you're expecting way too much out of me.
Exactly right.
And I couldn't wrap my mind around it because I was like, well, you love God as much as I do. We should be doing the same amount of work. Knowing it was nothing to do with loving God.
Right.
It was about, I don't have healthy boundaries in my life.
Yeah.
It's crazy, eh?
Yeah. I wrote down a couple of things thinking about this, and I thought about our good can be an enemy of the best. Okay, so let me talk about that. Good at many things takes away from our best things. So if I'm spread so thin, I'm doing all of these things, I may be good at them, but I can't be the best at this thing, that I'm really supposed to be doing. Because your cause may be an A+ for you, but it's a B- for me, and vice versa. Maybe something I'm passionate about, but Janice Watson doesn't. You may care, but it's not your thing. It's just like, that's okay. I'll support it, but I'm not gonna, join the picket line with you or anything like that.
Right.
I just can't get into it, and that's okay. That means if you call me and say, "Hey, I really need you to jump on board with this. This is really a good thing for our community." I may or may not be able to do that, and it's okay for me to say, Jana, I can't do that right now.
Right.
I'm going to have to say no. I've been kind of going through this. I mean, this is a personal journey for me too. I am excellent with boundaries. You can ask my partner at Fresh Start. She will say that all the time. But I am involved in a lot of things, and over this past year, I've backed away from a couple of things that have been a lot of fun for a long time that I've been involved in, but I found myself thinking that I don't find joy in this anymore, and almost like, it's here again. I have to do this again. And once I use the two words, have to, I really need to, take some inventory on that and look at it. So I've kind of backed away. So I said the word limits a while ago, and limits are our friend, which is another word for boundaries, but limiting ourselves, because I think it's better to be rested, energized, and prepared for one thing than scattered and weary for many things.
Wow. That's deep.
Yeah. And I think it's so true. I think it's so true. But the church tells us we have to do more and be here when the doors are open. The world's certainly telling us that. You got to be involved in all these things, got to coach everybody's little league, you got to be involved in this and that, run for this office, all this kind of stuff, rather than let's do what matters. Let's focus on what's our best thing.
That's right. And just parents of young children right now, maybe they're in elementary school or middle school, going into high school, listen, you guys, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of them. And so you have to, a lot of people say, oh, you look out for number one. And I'm like, well, you need to look out for number one, because if number one's not healthy, I can't look out for you.
2, 3, and 4 don't matter.
Exactly. It really doesn't. And that's where things become unhealthy, So, Joey, what have you done and your family during the pandemic to maintain your mental health? I'm meddling now, right?
No, I love to talk about this, Janet, because it's another area that I struggle with, especially early in ministry. Brief history on my story. I was 13 years in student ministry, and really through that just felt a burden to do counseling, and left student ministry, did the master's in counseling here at Georgia Southern University, and then was able to open my own practice here. And all that was really, really good. But early in ministry, early in marriage, little kids, I guess I thought I could do it all. I know that's probably nobody else's story, just mine, right?
Oh my gosh.
But thinking, I had to be at everything. I had to have the biggest youth ministry. It was just all the lies that were being told to me, but were still very positive things and being reinforced by parents and church and leadership. And again, not a negative thing. It's my job. It's what I'm supposed to do, but not to the neglect of my family.
Exactly.
So through some good conversations with a very godly wife who loves me beyond belief, who said, this is going to need to change a little bit.
Yeah.
And through, our own prayer together and looking at our own schedules, I got to the place where, work is work, and it needs to stay there. And especially going into counseling and sitting through 8 or 9 sessions per day. And people ask, how do you do this? How do you listen to this all day? And I hate to be crass right off the bat, but I say it's not my problem.
Right.
Your burden is not my burden. I can be empathic, I can be sympathetic and compassionate with you in a session and work through things therapeutically, but I'm not going to take it to my house. That's not fair. So literally every day when I end my job, I physically put my hand on my door handle and I close it and I say, God, I've done the best job I can do today, and I'll be back tomorrow.
Wow.
And it's a physical thing that I must do, because I'm only 3.5 minutes from my office.
Oh,
that's not long enough to unwind in the truck.
Yeah. I
also don't return calls on the way home. I stopped doing that. That was a trap that I fell into and kept coming in on the phone. That wasn't fair to the family either. So if I need to return a call, I just sit there in my office and get that done, and then when I walk out the door, I'm done.
That's powerful. I read a book by Norman Vincent Peale on positive imaging. If you have not read that book, I read this book. I have the Audible, actually. I listen to it twice a year. Good. Because it's just something. There's some books you need to read over and over. They're just that good, and this is one of them. And as I said, I listened to it, and he has a story in there that says that this one man did the same thing. When he left his job, he wrote down everything. I have done the best I could today.
Yeah.
And I will not take this home to my family. And then he would make checks of what I did today. Yeah. And then even some things that I didn't succeed at today.
Right.
And then he would wad it up and he would throw it in the trash can because now this day is over and there's nothing I can do about what's been done. Yeah. And now I'm going to go home and I'm going to be with my family. I'm going to be a father and I'm going to be a husband. Yeah. I'm not going to be a pastor. I'm not going to be a counselor, because we bring those hats home with us, don't we?
Absolutely. That's the exact statement that my wife said to me when I kept coming in on the phone. And we sat down and she says, I do not need the therapist who just got off work to come home. I need my husband and the father of our children. Oh, that hurt.
It does.
It stung so bad because it was so right. And I wanted to argue and I wanted to debate that. But she was exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And that goes for both of us. She's a teacher, and it's hard to let some things go. And that's, putting the phone down. And yeah, there's work that has to be done from time to time, but it's about attitude. It's not about the physical work as much as it is when somebody says to me, oh, I leave work at work. But you bring your bad attitude home with
Exactly.
you. You're still, I mean, we could do name calling right now, but I'm not going to. But that's just, you just act like, the bad attitude just comes, it precedes you coming in the door.
Yeah. So I think we really have to make an effort to put those things behind us and connect with this generation, connect with our young people. And I think having a positive attitude toward them really helps too, instead of this negative, oh, you're such a self-centered generation, and you can think of everything that's bad because it wasn't like your generation. Right. But if you think about it, when you were a young person, you weren't like your mom and dad's generation either. Nope. And there's something
special. I was smarter than them, just like my kids are smarter than me.
Exactly, yes.
It passes right down the line.
It does. I don't know how that happens, but they just keep getting smarter and smarter.
It's amazing.
Find the joy in your family. Find the joy in the day, in the things that you're doing, and connect with it. Yeah. And like we said earlier, there are so many voices out there. And I think you need to create those boundaries with the voices that you're listening to. And let's just, tune into the voice of God. Tune into the voice of your family, your children. Listen to them. Yeah. And listen to your own self-talk too. How are you talking about yourself? Yeah. Are you always speaking negative things over yourself? Or are you going, okay, this is something I could really work on without beating yourself up about it, and I see a lot of that too. But I'm telling you, if you do these things, I think little by little we'll start seeing a difference in our homes and our own happiness.
Yes, absolutely.
I know in my own life I have.
Yeah. And I do carry that burden for you talking about families, and I know we don't make the assumption that all families are intact, but I think about those kids, even at our high schools here, and even middle schools, but especially the high school where the kids are a little bit older, that literally the groups of kids I know that don't have families that they go home to, or they're staying with friends, or they're actually homeless, and
yes,
my burden is for them who don't or feel like they don't have that person to go to, is if it's just start with your school counselor or a teacher, somebody to open up to and say, hey, I need some help here. I feel like there's so much in our world today of coming out of this, of just this natural need for connection, and people want community, and it happens so naturally. We don't have to fabricate it.
Exactly.
People want to be around each other,
right?
And to help find that.
And little by little, we're coming out of this pandemic. I'm just believing it.
Yes.
We're getting some things behind us, and we're walking into the future, the present future, and just thanking God for the breath in our lungs, thanking Him for the opportunities that we have set before us. Right. Keep your mind, the Word says that we need to keep our mind set on things above. Think on these things of good report. If you open up your Bible, it'll tell you a lot.
Yes.
It really will. Yes. So, Joey, there's a lot of people listening to you, especially in the Statesboro area, I know. And if someone needs counseling and they want to bring their kids to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Quickest way, I won't put out phone numbers on here, but just our website is the easiest way to. You can fill out a form on there, and it's just freshstartboro, BORO.com. You can see different therapists there, and again, we have great therapists throughout our community. If we're not the right fit, we would love to help refer, whatever the need may be, whatever's going on. To find me, I have a Facebook page, but I post about every 6 to 8 years. If we're talking about boundaries, I have, and finding joy, I've never found joy in social media. And I've tried to make myself do it because I wanted to fit in, and it just doesn't work. So I don't really do it. Right. I read some things online and do that social media, but that's the quickest way to get in touch with us at Fresh Start.
That's awesome. Well, you guys, you've heard it right here from Joey Fennell, not Fennell. It's going to take me a minute to get used to that. Right here in Statesboro, Georgia. Thank you for making a difference in so many people's lives, and all the counselors. If you're a counselor out there, I want you to know you are my hero. Yes. One last thing before we leave, I want to tell you, counselors, the biggest difference that one of my counselors made for me when I was just being taken away from my home, going into foster care, the counselor looked at me because I held my head down a lot. I felt very shameful. I was hurting. And I'll never forget her. I wished I knew her name. I did forget her name, but I'll never forget her. She put her hand under my chin and she says, "Don't you ever hold your head down. Always hold your head up. This is not your fault. These things that happen to you are not your fault. So you always hold your head up." And I mean, I just got chills right now just saying that, because her voice made such a difference in this 12-year-old girl that was so broken. And it was just a couple of sentences, but it was powerful because she looked me in the eyes and she put her hand under my chin and she said those words. And I want you guys to know that one voice can make a difference, and you are making a difference. And you are my hero. I promise you. I appreciate all of you guys that are counseling out there. Joey, I appreciate you and your family and the community that we're all trying to, make a difference one voice at a time. So a big thank you, a big shout out to Joey and Fresh Start Counseling. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of our teachers and counselors in the school. Thank you for the investment that you've made in our children. And thank you for joining One Voice Podcast, making a difference one voice at a time. Love you guys. Thank you for listening to One Voice Makes a Difference. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and reviewing the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends about One Voice too. Your voice helps the show reach more people and to spread the gospel. If you'd like to hear more about my personal story, you can purchase my book, One Voice, on my website, www.janetswanson.org, or on Amazon and audible.com. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. Most importantly, if you're in a crisis, please call 24/7 Crisis Hotline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Don't wait, your life matters.